Tangier, the northern tip of Morocco, where Africa meets Europe. It's so close to Spain that on a clear day you can see it across the Strait of Gibraltar. For years it was separated from the rest of Morocco, governed separately as an international zone by a loose coalition of foreign governments. It gained a reputation as a place where anything could be bought for a price, and became a haven for spies, criminals, writers and artists. Anyone who wanted to escape the norms of this eluding promise of freedom. And what better place to start than the Collins, the oldest bookstore in the city, which really highlights the literary past. After all, this was a city that from the 50s to the 70s was a refuge to some of the most important authors of the Beat generation. The group of writers that influenced American culture in the 2 to 3 decades following World War II. Their works explored and explicitly detailed the extremes of the human condition. These authors played a major role in the creation of the timeless myth that is Tangier nowadays. And everywhere I seem to turn at the moment, I just get these lovely, lovely Mediterranean views. It's really quite pretty around this part of town. Paul Bowles really started it all. He moved to Tangier in 1947 and remained until his death in 1999. For most people, if they knew of Tangier at all, it was through his writing. In his writings, he created a vision of Tangier that still persists to this day. I want to see if there's any truth to it, and if there's any of that city remaining, if it ever existed. The city where William Burroughs, the gentleman junkie and elder statesman of the Beat generation, came in 1953 and later wrote his surrealist masterpiece Naked Lunch. And here we go, the Grand Sukko Square, the main square of the city centre which separates the kind of newer city part with the Medina. Let's head through the gate into the Medina itself. The Tangier of the time really suited Burroughs. It was cheap and sex and drugs were readily available, particularly here in the Petit Sukko, the small square in the heart of the Medina. Nowadays it's really cleaned up, there's a fresh lick of paint and a constant stream of tourists passing through. But still, sitting here in a place like Café Tingis, you really get an idea of the past, at least a feeling. The balcony cafe here at the Fuentes guest house is the perfect place to sit up above the Petit Sukko and watch the modern day world go by. This is most strange. Sat beneath the Medina, in the sun, working out? Nah, this ain't me. Hotel Elman Hotel is where Burroughs lived and actually wrote most of the material that would become Naked Lunch. He reinvented the international zone as the interzone in a drug-filled hallucination. Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg were actually here in 1957 and helped him complete it. The area now is still a bit run down and probably the sort of place you need to watch yourself at night, but the hotel itself is actually booked out. There's a bar below called the Tanger Inn, which is loud and open late, and there's a lot of memorabilia on the wall with pictures of Bowles, of Kerouac. And here we go, the area around the Elman Hotel where Burroughs stayed. It's certainly not what it used to be, of course. It was a very, very different time he was here, but you still just get a glimpse into that world in a way. There's a lot of graffiti on the streets here. It does feel a little run down, and it's probably not the sort of place you want to be coming around at night. And there is a distinctive smell of urine. But hey, let's have a wander around, let's see some of the street art. Grand Café de Paris is probably the most famous in the city, and it looks just like it must have done back in 1927 when it was founded. This was actually one of the first buildings outside of the Medina, and of course in the old days this was a haunt of Bowles and Burroughs. It's a wonderful classic timeless look here, wood and leather and fantastic mirrors with this beautiful terrace where you can just sit and watch the world go by. But there's a lot more to Tangier than just Grand Café de Paris and the Petit Succo. The cafe culture here is really intertwined with this vision of Tangier's past. So we're on our way now, through and past the north of the Medina. Oh, these hills for sure can be pretty rough. To another legendary spot. But the view's going to be well worth it. And there we go, the rather nondescript entrance to the famous Café Haer. Café Haer here is another wonderful cafe, almost stuck in time since it opened back in 1921. It's got a wonderful location right on the cliff face here, overlooking the Strait of Gibraltar, and this was also frequented by the famous beat authors and other celebrities. Paul Bowles used to come here, and he went on to show the Rolling Stones here and other writers and artists. And what a strange place this is, set over multiple levels, going almost all the way down the cliff with uneven stairs leading down. The beautiful views here and the strong mint tea certainly play a role in its popularity, and I think back in the old days, maybe the hashish helped as well. Nowadays it's mostly unchanged from what it must have been. There's plastic tables and chairs everywhere, probably a lot more people and a lot less hashish, but still, another wonderful, wonderful part of the Tangier cafe scene. And just slightly on from Café Haer here, we find the incredible rock-carved Phoenician tombs. In the 15th century, the Punic people set up a trading outpost and colony here, leading to the creation of this necropolis. It's just incredible the view you get here over the Strait of Gibraltar. We're going to head now into the north of the Medina, and we're going to track down the most famous, or perhaps infamous, of Tangier's cafes. A place which still shows the wild Tangier of times gone by. I love walking around this northern part of the Medina, with its winding little alleyways that are just perfect for getting lost in, the bright white buildings. It's such a different vibe from the south part, which is all hustle and bustle and shops and people. But if there's one place that really echoes back to the past of Tangier's cafe culture to me, it's got to be this one, Café Bara. Now this place, opened in 1943, has really seen its fair selection of celebrities in the past. It's hosted the Rolling Stones, there's a picture on the wall of the great Keith Richards smoking hashish here, and hashish is still to this day tolerated. It's got a far different vibe to Café Haer, which is a beautiful place, but at the end of the day it's just a non-stop factory of Instagram selfie shots. This still feels real, and in the evening, it basically reminds me of being in a coffee shop in Amsterdam. You would never expect to find this here in Morocco, but this is it, Café Bara. Of course, just like the great man Anthony Bourdain when he came here, I'm certainly not going to touch any of that. I'm just going to stick to the mint tea and breathe in this nice fresh air. And now for a completely different site. The Tangier American Legation was the first US public building outside of America, and it celebrates the historical relationship between the countries. The Kingdom of Morocco was actually the first country to recognize the US as an independent nation. It's also the only US building to be marked as a landmark outside of the US. Such a beautiful building here. Kind of hard to know which way to go really, but hey, just wander around until I start seeing stuff again, which I'm doing already. But there's this wonderful courtyard here between the buildings which make up the complex now. And downstairs in the second building, one of the highlights for me, the Paul Bowles wing. You got his old cases here, typewriters, loads of the books and various memorabilia. It's really interesting to see around. It must be the best collection in the city. That was absolutely worth coming into. It was really interesting exhibits, nice and peaceful as well. But the piece is about to end. Let's get back out into the craziness. But now there's a completely different side to Tangier, one that feels completely far removed from the old Medina, with the marina here, the lovely beach, the fancy restaurants, the cafes, and people trying to show off their money. People driving fancy sports cars, stuck in the same traffic as the rest of us. It's nice, but at the same time, in a way you could be anywhere. I'm going back to the old city. That's what I love. After spending a fairly reasonable amount of time here, I'm left with the feeling that this is a city where some of the freedoms that the past and the myths allude to does still exist, just in a very different way than you would expect. It feels like a city where people are slightly more accepting to differences and weirdness. A city that feels a little freer than some of the others, and also a city that I've really grown to love very quickly in my time here, and I really hope to return to. But for now, my time in Tangier is up. I've got to leave, but I hope you will come back, because I've got a lot more Morocco to show you. Next stop is going to be in Tétouan, the beautiful smaller city just an hour away. Hope to see you there.